Welcome to Taking Sides. I'm Rose Ferlito, your host. Thank you for joining us. Look, picture this. You just moved into your newly rented condo and paid the first 3 months of rent. Your family is finally adjusted to the move and you're getting comfortable in your new place. Then one day, you receive a notice in the mail. You have a week to move out of your new home. You've paid your rent, but your landlord didn't pay the mortgage. Tonight, the panel and special guest Charles Gallagher will discuss what to do when caught in this situation. Charles, thank you for being with us. Charles Gallagher is with Gallagher & Associates, law firm in St. Petersburg, and obviously he's going to be the expert in telling us some of these things, and that's why you're the guest tonight. So why don't you kind of address what Krista's frustration is, and I certainly understand it.
It's a horrible trend, and we're seeing it more and more where landlords are pocketing the rent, not passing it on to the mortgage company, and as a result, foreclosures are being filed and tenants are being asked to vacate the property. And we're getting calls about it all the time. It's a very, very sad trend. Florida right now, of course, is number 3 nationally in all foreclosures. 500,000 foreclosures are pending in the state, so it's a widespread problem, and a lot of tenants are being displaced, unfortunately.
Now, you know, you mentioned that you got an eviction notice as soon as you didn't pay your March rent. Would that not cost him a fee for that service?
It would. And what's going to happen, the first step you'll find out as a tenant, you're going to get served with a lawsuit to foreclose the mortgage. They must name all parties, the parties that are in the house, the parties that own the house. So tenants will get some notice as a heads up. That's the first step.
And I did get that within 45 days of moving in my home. I got
basically, does she have any rights in this situation? I mean,
Yeah,
you know, I mean, we hear horror stories about squatters who decide not to pay. You could have done that and stayed there and, I guess, gone up that ladder. But, I mean, we hear those horror stories and you can't get them out unless you get served it. But here's someone who's paying their rent, yet it seems like they have no rights if the owner of the property isn't taking care of his end of things. All of a sudden, you know, she's out the door just like he is.
There are 2 segments of rights she does have, and unfortunately your timing was a little bit bad. Near the end of '09, they passed a new law, a federal law, that protects homeowners in these scenarios. And it requires that the terms of leases be honored during that foreclosure process, and it requires that the tenants have the same rights they would have with the lender as well as the defaulting landlord as well. So thankfully it's been solved in the future now, but unfortunately it wasn't at your point in time. The other rights you have, and as you said, you counterclaimed as well. You sued the landlord under your lease for the non-disclosure, and a matter of law in Florida, anybody who's renting a property has got to be given any kind of defects.
But Charles, if he was pushing her out by eviction, how much longer really, if he was that much in default in terms of paying the mortgage, how much longer could he keep the property anyway? That's what I was saying about, he was going through some costs to get her out.
Certainly.
To what benefit would that be to him?
That's the other odd question, is that foreclosures take between 12 months to 18 months to go all the way through.
Okay.
So there's some possibility that she may have filled out that term.
And he could have gotten somebody else in then if they hadn't foreclosed on him. And the next renter would know as little bit as you did about what the history was. Is that what his intention was, you think?
Very
Perhaps?
very likely to find somebody who would fill in that void and pay that rent. And right now, a lot of folks don't know where to look to see whether or not that property's in foreclosure. But it's a very sad topic.
And the thing is, he can provide proof of his current, mortgage situation the month you move in, and within 3 or 4 months,
He can be
it
current.
can be a different situation, And I think there are definitely some holes in the laws and whatnot.
There is. And
relative
let me
to
just tell you, talking about foreclosures or closing down on somebody, let's make sure our sponsors don't do that to
yes.
us. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Please stay with us. This is an interesting topic. Thanks again for staying with us. Bob, I don't want to ignore you, and you're unusually quiet. Any thoughts?
No, I mean, I've represented apartments for 21 years as an ad guy, and it is an area of abuse on both sides, and the wonderful world of summary ejectments, as they talked about. I used to hear the other side. How quick can we get them out of there? When they're not paying the rent. But the thing that's really despicable about this is he was accepting the money and not paying the mortgage. Yeah. Now that is just
that's common, right?
It is.
They're getting the profit.
Beneath contempt.
It is.
Well, there is no recourse or no, I guess, slap on the hand or fine or anything like that for a landlord that's caught doing that, no matter who they put in that position. I mean, literally within 3 weeks, we went from like the 3-day notice they gave me, and I responded to that, to waking up on a Friday morning and finding a sheriff's eviction notice saying I needed to be out by Monday morning at 7 o'clock.
But see, some people that do that as a matter of profession, if you would, they know how long they can stretch it, right? So, I
Absolutely.
mean, you could have stayed there probably a lot longer than you did. I mean, I don't know what the guidelines are, but
No, certainly. And yet the rights you have, as you said, it's sad that there's not any more of a slap on the wrist. Your rights are purely contractual in nature, so you have to sue him to actually enforce those rights. There's no criminal or no governmental interaction where they can automatically interpose some sanctions against
And
the
so
guy.
you have the
know what?
cost that she's absorbed for getting in there, the cost she's going to absorb for getting out of there, and the rent during that time. Plus, then she has to go and hire an attorney and sue him.
So what's the upshot here? I mean, if she's paying her rent, or anyone else who's in this situation is paying their rent, living up to their obligation contractually, is there a way to force the actual owner of the property to take that and apply it to the mortgage loan itself, so that they're satisfying that, so that there is no eviction of any kind, there is no foreclosure?
Sure. The solution is to go up the ladder and actually go to the lender and say, look, I'm a tenant here.
Yeah.
The landlord's defaulting. I want to pay. I want to stay here. Can I go ahead and pay you my rent
Yeah.
in lieu of paying the landlord?
And that is exactly what my countersuit asked the judge that was handling the case for, and they did not even grant me a hearing. They sent a sheriff to give me a 3-day notice to vacate the property as a full-blown eviction. I didn't even get a hearing.
Sadly, that was, and again, when that happened, that was the law. Right now, there's a 90-day requirement. So a foreclosure goes through.
When did that go in?
End of 2009.
And
So-
when did this happen?
In April,
Of this year?
a month and a half ago.
Well,
So what happens? Does it get into a
the-
sublet type situation, perhaps, in the
yes.
interim?
In
Yeah.
essence, yes. In essence, a lender becomes a landlord. Now,
Yeah.
now the landlord will abide by the same terms of the lease that are under with the tenant. Now, a lot of lenders, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, automatically will assume those terms. They have no problem doing that. Other lenders, as in your case, were more resistant and want the property back to flip and sell it to somebody else. So.
Yeah.
They don't want to be landlords. I mean,
No, they don't
this
want
is
to own
very
property, no,
similar
that's for sure.
to what happens in my industry, where advertising agencies are famous for collecting the money and not paying the bill. But it's our debt. I mean, you know, and more people have gone out, and the client ends up having to pay twice for the media. But I mean, it really is our debt, and that's what forces agencies into bankruptcy, because they get
Yeah.
too far behind in the float, and they're not paying the bills. But the minute you sign it, that's why I don't understand. From an agent standpoint, essentially, that landlord should become an agent of the bank de facto, maybe not de jure, but de facto, and should be responsible for the debt.
Well, but they can't be, and I mean, there's a reason they're in that
Yeah.
situation. And I think you have to look beyond that and say, look, the real crime here is that people like Krista or someone else in her situation is getting thrown out on their seat, into the street and they've done what they're supposed to do. They've
Right.
lived up to their
Right.
end of the obligation. And what I wonder is, how do you protect them? Is there some kind of an
There really is no
insurance? There
protection.
is. It
What
seems
can
like
you
there is
do
no
if you're
protection.
going to, you've given up your home, or you don't want the expense of having a home, so you're going to rent someplace? What can you do up front to kind of secure yourself? I mean,
There are two things. First
Okay.
of all is thankfully, foreclosure is a public record.
Right.
If you know where to look, you can find out whether or not a foreclosure has been filed against a certain property.
but Charles, that may not be the case when you're going in. Everything may
This is
be
true, this is
current,
true.
everything may
This
be.
is true. Well, the other thing is asking the landlord for actually written representations as to the default status or good standing of the mortgage.
And I mean, if he's this upstanding a citizen, you think he's really going to be honest with you?
Well, it'll protect some
Good
folks.
point.
But I agree. I mean, if someone's unscrupulous
Is there
enough-
such a thing as going to the lender and saying, can you get any kind of a security type thing with them directly and override the landlord? Or you
they're going to be
can't?
very, very hesitant to talk to someone directly. You
So
can
you
try
won't
that,
do that.
absolutely.
I've
But
been
that's
there,
not
done that.
something
But a
that's
lot of,
easy.
it's a whole matter of contract rights, and a lot of lenders are very conservative in that regard. The scarier concern here is not just being dispossessed from your home, it's the judgment aspect. And what
Yeah.
happens is, when the process server comes out, hands you the paperwork, they ask you, what's your name? When you tell them your name, they return that back to the attorney's office, they amend the lawsuit, and you are now named as a co-defendant, even though you're not on the mortgage. Florida has been not on the upswing at all from the whole foreclosure boom. Now, there are two solutions here. One is that you go ahead and further empower the government with and the law is called Protecting Tenants at Foreclosure Act. Okay, it was a good first start. Okay, but the problem is there's not any punitive aspect of it for landlords. It only gives a bit of a freeze period in the event of a foreclosure. It gives tenants 90 days of notice, and it requires those landlords adhere to the leases. There's got to be some kind of punitive aspect on the back end to punish landlords from doing this in the future. That's the
Because they're getting away with it.
absolutely.
What do you see as an outcome solution that we can look at?
you're going to have to increase the government interaction with regard to these laws, this act.
Agreed.
We have a good start. However, 90 days is just not sufficient to go ahead and punish a landlord and keep a tenant placed in their property.
Well, I told you about 2 scenarios where Hillsborough County, and probably similar to other counties in this state, are doing some things. But one helps somebody who's already gone through foreclosure, the owner. The other one helps somebody who's trying to make ends meet and pay their bills that are still in their home and are threatened perhaps with foreclosure. But none of the things that I have seen as a sitting county commissioner affect or help
The
a
tenant.
victim like a tenant.
Well,
So, I mean, give me some ideas, because certainly I'm always open to bringing ideas back to council, but I don't, how do we protect her and not violate the relationship that the landlord has with the lender? Doesn't seem like it's right, but he has the right.
No, sure. It's a matter of contract on one end. On the other end, it's her contract rights also. Really, the best thing is going to be a moratorium on the foreclosure process in that respect, in that property. So the lender would then reap the benefits of those payments. They'd be paid up the ladder. At the same time, the landlord would have no benefit at all from those payments either.
Look, it seems very simple to me. If the average amount of time that it takes for someone to go through the foreclosure process is about 18 months, correct?
Correct.
Well, then let's, instead of this arbitrary 90-day cap that we put on for
That's awful.
the tenant, which is awful, ridiculously
Terrible.
awful, let's make it an 18-month. If you want to put an arbitrary number on it, put 18 months on it, because at least that matches what you believe is the average amount of time it takes someone to go through the foreclosure process. And open up the opportunity for an amendment, an extension of that period if the foreclosure process isn't complete, because she's the one who has to be protected here. And maybe in that 18 months, you know, hopefully it takes all that time, because someone's hoping that the owner is going to come out of the situation he or she is in, and they're going to be able to pay their bills. Meanwhile, if she's paying her bills right along, she should not be thrown into this situation, thrown out on the street, criminalized, and made to look like a criminal when she's a
Absolutely.
victim.
And has any other state that you know of, Charles, done something like that to assist the renter?
The act is a federal act, so it applies to all the states. Florida hasn't acted upon that. It's a federal law that's been in place. But it's really about allocating blame, too. Who's the most blameworthy? Who's the least blameworthy? And protect the tenants. And if you're going to go ahead and blame somebody, obviously blame the landlords, and by application, the lenders.
Now that we've done this, we've talked a little bit about what Hillsborough County is doing, and you've said some other things. Thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of quickly, about, do you think government can come in and save this, or it's just going to be what it is for what it is?
You know what? I'm going to say thumbs up. They're going to have to, number one. And number two, I think they're going to have to start acting on it swiftly, because we all know that the red tape and your bureaucracy that you have to go through to even get there is going to have to get started soon.
Thanks.
I agree with Kristen 100%. As I said before, there's somebody put an arbitrary 90-day cap on the amount of time that the tenant can stay in the place. Put it at 18 months, at least for now, match it. Obviously, it'll take some doing, but it can be done. Easily can be done. Needs to be done.
It needs to. There's going to be a great deal of crafting that's going to have to be done. Bob?
Thumbs down. I think it's too much for government. I think there's too many rights. There's too much money involved on the short term. I don't think it can be effectively done. There'll be too many people. There's too many lobbyists will be involved. Too many people trying to push this. I've been familiar with the housing lobby. I mean, there's a lot of money out there, and I just think it's so hard for government. Government just keeps getting this stuff thrown at it.
Well,
I just think it's too tough.
And we can try to do some things, but when things were good, people didn't want government involved. Now it's all about government,
Yeah.
Roy. Charles, thank you for being
Thank
with
you.
us.
My
I
pleasure.
greatly appreciate it, and I think this is not going to go away anytime soon. So hopefully you can come back and visit us
love
and
to.
give us an update.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Panel, as always, we appreciate
And hopefully
it.
it's a positive update at that time.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Hope so.
So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. In the meantime, I'm Rose Ferlita. Thank you for joining us and taking sides.